You know, you're good at see.
Good morning. Welcome to our Boardwalk Talk series brought to you by one of the educators here at the lab, and this is Greg Graber. Greg is also part of the education faculty here at the lab, and Greg is going to tell you all a little bit about sharks. Sharks that can be caught from our local shores while people are shore fishing, and some of the sharks that are making headlines around the world this summer. So I'm going to let Greg tell you about them, and then you guys can take a closer look.
All right. Thanks for being here. People back out with live boardwalk talks out on the damp boardwalk. So we appreciate everybody coming out to the Dauphin Island Sea Lab today. And so yes, like she said, my name is Greg Graber, and I'm one of the education faculty, what we call across the street with our Discovery Hall programs, our kindergarten through 12th grade, and our teacher component of the lab. Here at the Dauphin Island Sea Lab. So we just finished, everybody's recovering now, we just finished our summer programs for summer camps and that sort of thing, and we're finishing our final college course in marine neuroscience right now, right across the street here at the lab. So summer is winding down for us, and what better way to finish talking about it than we're chatting about sharks. And so quick background about me, I'm from Jackson, Mississippi, so I didn't have any shark around me for a while, but I thought sharks were cool from the time I was in probably second or third grade, and that's how I got into this kind of thing. But they've been in the news quite a bit lately for people that have been coming down. Obviously, last week was Shark Week on Discovery Channel, if anybody watched any of that before you came down, where they have started focusing a lot more on some of the science that's going on and that sort of thing, which is a good thing rather than the sensational part of it. But a lot of the sharks that are common around here are not what you see on Discovery Channel and Animal Planet, all right? So the really, really common stuff that doesn't make the headlines, but makes headlines on the Dauphin Island Facebook page and that sort of thing, with people holding up their catches and that sort of thing throughout the summer. And then I just got back from New York, where yes, there were a few minor shark attacks up in New York. There were 5 within a week while I was up there. And that sort of thing. They've really been in the news a lot. And then even the weird and odd versions, just this week, it made national headlines and international headlines. There was a Greenland shark, a sleeper shark, caught in research like we do here at the Dauphin Island Sea Lab, but all the way down in Belize. And it's called a Greenland shark for a reason, because it doesn't live in Belize, that's for sure, most of the time. And so that was a really interesting catch just this week, and has made NPR and a bunch of other things, because that shark is a massive, massive, massive animal, rivaling the length of large white sharks and that sort of thing, that was pulled up in some research from Florida International University down in Belize, which is pretty interesting. And so the fun fact about that shark, though, is that that shark has been videotaped with underwater robots right here in the Gulf of Mexico at the base of oil and gas platforms out in the middle of the Gulf. So it's not unheard of. Water's cold down there. They're cold water critters, and lots of crazy facts about them. They're one of the largest or longest living animals on the earth right now. Recent ages, maybe a little bit too long lifespan, were 400 years for one animal to be alive, but more common, I think, a little bit more, maybe 200, 225, 250 years or so. But sharks are interesting in that it's actually kind of hard to tell how old they are, but we can. And so that's some research that's done here with not only the Dauphin Island Sea Lab, but our former PhD postdoc, Dr. Marcus Dryman, who still does his research out of the Dauphin Island Sea Lab, but he's just next door at Mississippi State in the Biloxi office. So sharks, we'll start off from the kind of the very beginning. Are sharks fish? Are sharks fish?
Yes.
Yes, they are. Sharks are fish. That is not a very common fact that people know. A lot of the time it's raise your hand if you think they're fish, and some will raise and some will kind of do the half hand up and that sort of thing. And so yes, they are fish. Now the difference is is that there are two kinds of fish on planet Earth. So when you look at classification and taxonomy and stuff like that, you have fish like bass and brim and red snapper and red drum and speckled trout all around here. And then you have sharks and skates and rays and their odd, weird cousins. And so what's the difference? What are the two distinguishing characteristics of fish? Bones and cartilage, that's exactly right. So sharks are what we call cartilaginous fishes. Scientifically, chondrichthyans rather than osteichthyans. Think about osteoporosis, right? Bones. So chondrichthyans are sharks and skates and rays, and like I said, some of their weird other cousins called chimeras and ratfishes and elephant fish and ghost fish and some of these other weird things around here. So when we're talking about sharks and skates and rays, we're talking about animals that lack any bones, and their skeletons are made of like our ears, right? Cartilage and, you know, meniscuses and tips of noses and that sort of thing. And so when you see a shark jaw out at an aquarium or a science center or something like that, or you see them at a gift shop or something like that, cartilaginous, all right? And so that is one of the kind of misconceptions about sharks. But Discovery Channel, Animal Planet like to talk about it a lot, that they're, you know, cartilaginous fishes, and they are for sure. So when we're talking about sharks, there are a lot of characteristics though that differentiate them from bony fishes and other sharks and skates and rays from those bones, those bony fishes. And so what's a characteristic of a shark that someone can throw out that's different from a bass or a brim maybe? Skin. All right, so sharks have scales like most fish do. If you ask what characteristics do fish have, if you start there as well, fins, gills, right? Bones, but scales are definitely one of them, right? So shark scales are different than other bony fishes, period. So one of the things that people find interesting and that Discovery Channel talks about is the skin of a shark. What does it feel like? If you read it in the book, you talk about it on Animal Planet, what does shark skin feel like? Feels like sandpaper, right? And so it definitely does feel like sandpaper, there's no doubt about it. And so it doesn't matter what kind of shark you're talking about. So here is a very popular, in the news a lot, this is a bull shark, everybody. If you're thinking of a sharky shark, this is as sharky a shark as you're going to get. It's got all the fins it should have. It looks like a shark. It feels like a shark, and you can hear it without doing much work. You can hear the sandpaper, but different sharks have different grits of sandpaper, and the grits of that sandpaper are actually really microscopic small teeth. So if you didn't know that, what is really interesting about sharks, and of course what terrifies everybody when they're at the beach, is to come in contact with those teeth, right? But these teeth are derived from their skin. Okay, so what started out as a way to protect your body turned into a way to kind of capture your prey, which is pretty awesome in the scheme of things. And just like their skin and our skin, they shed stuff all the time, and they shed their teeth. That's one of the really common facts that people know about sharks, is that the way they always write it in a book or on Discovery Channel or Animal Planet is that it's a conveyor belt of teeth, but it really, really is. And so she was just asking before, well, if they lose one and it grows back, do they just have what's in the mouth? And the answer is it will lose this whole mouth multiple times in its life and still have those teeth in its mouth. And so one of the fun things about it that is now on Dolphin Island is the ability to find those teeth. We used to not have it. She's kind of the shark tooth whisperer and has been for like the last 20 years. I found one. She's found like 20. But in the last like 5 years, with the new beach on the East End that was recently pumped up, there are now shark teeth all over the place. And so you can go out there and find them mixed in with some of these other cool rocks called otoliths, which are ear bones in the heads of fish. So we were talking about aging sharks and how do we know how old they are. Fish are super easy to age because they have these things in their head like we do called otoliths, ear stones or ear bones. And if you section them, which means you cut them, and you shave them down, you can age it just like the tree. And so they have little circles inside of them. And so right across the street, just behind this building, across the street, somebody is probably doing that at the Sea Lab today in our fisheries ecology lab. We do otolith work all the time, helping get better data sets for red snap or whatever. And most of the otoliths that you're gonna find out here is the guy that you catch at the beach all the time, called an Atlantic croaker. If you've ever caught a croaker and you tossed a line in, you've caught a croaker, guess what? It croaks. All right? And so you find a lot of those Atlantic croaker otoliths. But mixed in is shark teeth. And so some of the stuff that goes on here at the lab is we have a good buddy down here who's done a couple of these boardwalk talks who helps teach our summer sharks and rays course. And his jam is he does shark teeth and fossilized shark teeth. And one of the cool things about Alabama that most people don't know is we are really one of the spots, if not the spot, for shark teeth, starting all the way up in Huntsville, really the oldest sharks on the planet, all the way down to the coastline. And you can find those teeth all across the state of Alabama. And a really good example is I took about 20 teachers for one of our teacher workshops 100 miles up the shoreline to Point A Dam near Andalusia if you drove down I-65. And every teacher went away with 50 shark teeth for their class in the fall, 100 miles away from the coast. And that's just one example of where you can find teeth pretty commonly around. But it all comes from that crazy cool skin that are called dermal skin, right? Denticles, teeth, dermal denticles, or placoid scales is the thing that you'll find out in the books that they're called. So different than a bass or a brim scale, which are cycloid, science word, or tenoid scales a lot of the time. So when we look at our common sharks, this is what we see on the Facebook page. This is one of the ones that makes news. Hey, I caught this baby shark really at the beach, right? And do I need to worry about it because we caught several of them? And the answer is this is about as big as it's ever going to get. It might get 6 inches bigger, and this is by far, in the research done here at the lab and now over in Mississippi, right around our area, this makes up multiple thousands of our 15,000 shark data set. All right, this is an Atlantic sharp-nosed shark. And the problem with the Atlantic sharp-nosed shark is it gets lumped into, yeah, I caught a sand shark once at the beach. Everybody's caught a sand shark if you've ever caught a shark, and there's no such thing as a sand shark. All right? And that's one of the things about sharks is that coastal sharks are really difficult to tell apart. All right? Even so, this past, last month, in the biggest, oldest fishing tournament in America, the 89th Alabama Deep Sea Fishing Rodeo, they reintroduced the shark category. Only 4 species were allowed to be brought in. I think it totaled 15 total sharks in the rodeo, but one of them that was brought in that wasn't weighed was actually a prohibited shark by federal government, but it is mistaken for a bull shark a lot, and that's called a sandbar shark. So it wasn't allowed to be weighed or any of that, but we were able to use it for science and take samples of it since it was brought in, which is great. So we can learn a lot from those 15 sharks, and especially if you're targeting the big ones, which we generally don't get all around here, are these massive sharks a lot of the time. And but they make a lot of news, right? And so the ones that really made news recently is this guy a couple of weeks ago. And if you're on Facebook or you're on social media, there was drone footage right across the bay of Gulf Shores, Perdido coastline, and that drone footage pans out, and there must be 500 sharks. I mean, beach is right there, right here, hundreds of sharks just swimming around, and of course, nothing happened, right? And
How
that
many
is
of you have
very
ever
typical.
caught sharks shore fishing?
Caught a
Anybody?
shark shore fishing?
Anybody ever seen them from shore? Yeah.
Yeah, you see them swimming around, right?
Great.
And so she was just lucky enough to be out on the boat recently with one of her excursions last week, and they were feeding off the back of the trawl last week, which is pretty fun. But this is the one that made the news. This is the common blacktip. All right, this is the common blacktip. If you caught a shark, that's the other one. If you don't catch a sand shark, you catch a blacktip. And that's weird because this one's got black tips. This one's got some black tips. This one's got some black tips. So does this one. All right, so you can see where the sand shark idea comes from and why it's hard.
Greg, you want to pass around the Atlantic Sharpness?
Yeah. So if anybody wants to pass it around, the telltale sign when you're catching this guy is this one is seen a little bit better days, but it does have these faint white freckles. And if you catch a small shark and it has faint white freckles, that's going to be an Atlantic sharpnose every single time. All right, it will have black tips and that sort of thing around. And so this one was actually tagged and then recaptured a little while later, and when it was recaptured, just didn't make it. And again, it's in the data set or thing, but you can see one of the recapture tags that we use. Same idea. Think about it as a cow ear tag on a big pasture, right, to identify cows. That's basically what it is. So if anybody wants to pass it around, you can pass around a shark for sure. We use them all the time. You can feel that sandpapery-like skin. And so back to the black tip. Very, very common shark around here, and one of its telltale signs of catching an actual black tip is this fin right here doesn't have a black tip on it, which is interesting because you would think if it's called the black tip, it should have all of its fins black. But the spinner shark has all of its fins black, which is just as common. And so when people catch it and it's got black tips, people think that it is a black tip shark, which is kind of interesting. But it's actually the black tip that lacks it, and the spinner shark has all of its fins black. So the question is why doesn't the black tip have all the black tips? Because this was named first. And so the spinner as the black tip. This was named first. So that's how you kind of can get that idea about why it's named that. So pretty interesting, but they're beautiful fish. If you've never gotten a chance to see one, this is it. The other thing that I've seen a lot recently on the Facebook pages, and I've seen several of them, and we just caught one recently out here with our school groups, was hammerheads. All right, so we have multiple species of hammerheads, mostly being scalloped and the great hammerhead, which is the largest of the hammerheads on the planet. And most of the ones that we catch are juvenile size. On the Facebook page last week on Dolphin Island, somebody's holding up a hammerhead that was about 3 feet long. And they're fascinating for lots of reasons. One, just the whole idea of having a head like this is pretty wacky in the first place. But when you see them around here, most of them are juveniles, and when we catch them, a lot of the times they're very small, and one of the ways you can tell is that this is a shark with a belly button. All right, so it's got an umbilical scar right here on its chest, just like we have a belly button when we were born as well. So they have an umbilical cord and a placenta and are birthed like we are, which is pretty interesting around. But the great hammerhead, the scalloped hammerhead, they do get quite large, and so I've been on the boat when we've tagged some that are 8 or 10 feet long, and they get bigger than that. The great hammerhead especially gets much bigger than that. So those guys are actually pretty common around here, and people are scared of them because they're big. All right, they are not generally aggressive at all in the scheme of aggression and sharks and that sort of thing. They just get quite large.
So you've got some of their common prey species up there.
Yeah, and so one of their arch enemies, the arch enemy of a hammerhead shark, is actually their cousin, which is a stingray. So like you can pet right here behind us in the touch tank, hammerheads hunt stingrays. And they use that head, which is pretty awesome. One of the things that kind of makes you a shark that Discovery Channel likes to talk about are all these little blackhead zits across their head that if you are to squeeze those blackhead zits, jelly comes out of their head. And that jelly actually senses electromagnetic pulses. And so it can feel a stingray buried under the sand heartbeat to locate that prey underneath the sand, or muscles twitching and that sort of thing. And so it can differentiate a floppy fish that's not doing great, which is why sharks are great, is because they're keystone species, and they help take out some of those wounded fish that might be sick or whatever out of the ocean, and they can tell that by how those the electrical receptors are sensing electricity, which is pretty awesome. Yeah, man?
Does it hurt if the sharks, when you squeeze the black zits, or did it not feel like that?
Well, when it's dead, no. So not for these guys, but it is one of the reasons why, you hear about, I punched the shark to get it away from me. There's a lot of sensory right here, and if you do a shark dissection or something like that, you can see the nerve areas that go back to the brain. There's a lot of sensory going on right there at the front of the snout. But the hammerhead is not the only one. All of these sharks will have those little tiny black dots all around their heads. when they are
Look
out.
for them on this.
Yeah, so when you're walking around, definitely just
look for 'em on
take
there?
a peek at them. But yes, stingrays, as a cousin of sharks, they are a major, major prey item for those hammerheads that people find so fascinating, which is pretty fun. So, and stingrays are not the only shark or cousin that do have spines. Sharks have spines, depending on what group of sharks they are, and they're venomous as well. Okay, so if you can remember back to maybe high school, maybe somebody dissected a spiny dogfish shark, and a lot of the times if you dissect that in a high school anatomy class, the spines are cut off because they got to ship them in a bag or something like that so they don't poke it, and you might not have seen those spines, but they do have those spines, and stingrays just kind of take it to a different level with their ability to sting. And by the way, we're all down here, I assume on vacation, a lot of us. If you do get stung by a cousin of a shark, by a ray, hot water. All right, hot water is the way to deal with it, and that's what they're going to do at the emergency room is...
Well, we could also
kind of
tell
ramp
them
up
how to try to avoid that.
Yeah, shuffle your feet. Because we were just out last week with our final summer camp at Sand Island, took a boat out to Sand Island. We probably saw 15 Atlantic stingrays, like what you'll see right there. This happens to be a blunt nose. And they were everywhere. And you just shuffle your feet, they'll move around, they'll swim around and that sort of thing and kind of get out of your way when you're out. So those are definitely some of the super common critters that you'll see around when you're out. And then probably the one that gets confused a little bit. You got a question? Oh, good.
Can stingrays still sting when they're dead?
No, because they're not making the toxin. Now, the spike is pokey, so we have to be careful if we pull it out of a bucket or something like that not to get poked by it, but it's not going to make us sick or anything like that. And so the rays themselves, when you're shuffling your feet, they'll get away from you. And that's another thing that's been in the news is the giant ray that jumped into somebody's boat a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if y'all saw that in the news. That is actually a pretty, not only a rare occurrence to have it jump in your boat, that's super rare, but that animal we don't see a ton of around here. That is a spotted eagle ray, and in 20 years here at the Dolphin Island Sea Lab, I've only caught one in the probably 1,000 boat trips with students and that sort of thing that I have taken over the years. And we catch one every few years, so probably since we've been here 5 or 6 or something like that, maybe.
We got a comment from Frosty, Greg.
Okay.
He said on TV they say you can hold a shark nose and they will kind of go limp. Comment on the sense. I think that's a comment.
Well,
on the sensory.
yeah, it's back to the sensory thing that you can kind of give them a sensory overload with those pores. Those are called the ampullae of Lorenzini. Somebody really wanted their name in a book, right? And kind of came up with that, but that is that electrosense, and it's not only their nose, but they will kind of relax, but it's the other thing. It's what they call tonic immobility, when you can flip over a shark and they'll kind of relax and kind of go into almost a catatonic state, and that's how a lot of research is done when they get them to the side of the boat several times. And the other thing that's been in the news that Shark Week just debuted last week is in South Africa, where you used to be able to go dive for sharks. It was one of the hot spots where air jaws jumps out of the water attacking seals and stuff. You used to see hundreds of white sharks and white shark sightings every year. They've almost become non-existent, and it's because there are 2 orcas that have gone into this area and have essentially scared the great whites away. And on the video last week debuted was the first documented footage live, easy to see, of 2 orcas tag teaming a great white and killing a great white with drone footage. And it's fascinating, but one of the really cool things about that is that they generally don't eat the whole shark. You would think it's a big mammal that has a high metabolism and a shark that it would just go ahead and take it out. What they are interested in, and they wash up dead when the great whites do, is they're interested in their giant livers that are full of fats and oils, and they'll actually eat the liver out of the shark and just let the shark kind of float away, drift away at that point, and it'll wash up dead, which is pretty interesting.
More calorie dense than the mussel.
Yeah, it is. It's super fatty and oily, and they'll use that. And so if you were to dissect these sharks, the biggest organ on the inside, by far, not even close, is the liver on the inside. So that is kind of the idea behind the sharks. And then, last but not least, is the rare, weird sharks that you might be able to see. And that's why I brought up that Greenland shark at the beginning, is we have a bunch of kind of weird ones that have occasionally crept into our research and that sort of thing. And so these are the ones that are kind of fun, that are different from other sharks. And you might not get a chance to see these kind of anywhere else, which is pretty fun. So this is what is called a 7-gill shark. And if you don't know anything about sharks, one of the things sharks have that make them different from bony fish is they have gill slits. And most sharks have how many gills?
5, right?
Five. There is a 6-gill and there is a 7-gill, but those are rare. All right, in the scheme of sharks, they're only the cow sharks are a pretty small group, and so this one happens to be a 7-gill shark. And one of the signs of it that it's weird and different is how gigantic its eyeball is. And when this was pulled up, it was neon green, glowing in the dark. Bioluminescing this big giant, the eyeball.
Not the whole shark.
Yeah, not the whole shark, just the eyeball was this luminous green orb that was pulled out, which is pretty interesting. But you notice it's different from the other ones. Only has one dorsal fin. No big dorsal fin up on top, further in the back. And when you're walking around and you get a chance to, definitely one of the craziest mouths around. Shark teeth are different from top to bottom, but I think this probably takes the cake as the weirdest top to bottom shark. They are absolutely completely different from top to bottom on this 7-gill shark. And then last but not least is something that Shark Week does like to talk about, is a fairly small shark that is interesting because of its teeth. And so this is a type of gulper shark, which is what a cookie cutter shark is. If anybody's ever heard of that in the deep sea. And the cookie cutter shark is the one that whales and squid and other things will have little tiny circle scars, because just like a cookie cutter, it'll come up, it'll open its mouth almost to a perfect circle and go whoop, whoop, and just take a little plug out of the fish. And their teeth are so sharp and so large that you can see them on submarines, like where the paint's been chipped into a circle with their mouth. And so their little claim to fame is that they have the largest kind of tooth to body ratio, I think is what they call it in nature, for a small animal with large teeth, which is pretty interesting.
You want to show the small?
Yeah, and so this guy, like I said, has different grits. Can't even move your hand forward. It's really, 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 really rough for those dermal denticles right there. And then it's missing a fin. So again, the diversity in the sharks is actually pretty high, even though the numbers of sharks compared to bony fishes is pretty small. Yeah.
I read a book one time, and there was like this shark that didn't have any teeth, but he could open his mouth like really wide, just like swallow his prey.
Yeah, so there are a couple of them that they actually do have teeth, but they just don't have to use them. And so it's the biggest fishes in the world, and that is called a whale shark. Yeah. And the other one is called a basking shark. And those are gigantic sharks that are filter feeders. So they eat plankton and small fish and that sort of thing. That is almost exclusively what they feed on. And then if you see them on Discovery Channel or something like that, this is what you're going to see hanging off of them. This is not a shark. This is a bony fish, but this is what is called a remora, or a shark sucker. And these are what you see underneath their bellies, hanging on their fins, getting a free ride around the world right here. And it looks like it got stepped on as a kid. But what happened was, this is its dorsal fin that got modified as a suction cup, so it gets an easy way to get around the world. All right, it's not a parasite, and it's not really necessarily, quote, bad for the shark at all when you are looking at it. But it does look like it's upside down, because the flat part is the top of it, so it can lay flat up against the shark. And it attaches to things like sea turtles as well. So, kind of finishing up, we got last of the weird stuff are some of the other deep water crazy cool ones that we don't ever get to see in our research, because most of our research is from the continental shelf in shallow water all around here. These are the deeper water ones, like this little lantern shark right here.
So most of these specimens were collected either through our education programs, where we are sampling biodiversity out in the Mobile Bay or out in the Gulf of Mexico, or they were collected through shark researchers who contributed samples to us. These that Greg is holding up were brought to us by a local fishing family. They're professional watermen. And so sometimes when they go out and they're in deep water, they'll pull up unusual animals, and sometimes they bring them to us and contribute to our collection of specimens here.
Which is pretty awesome. So really, really cool specimens right here. Definitely
you can
stuff.
observe the really big eyes on those as well.
Yep. And you can see the pressure change while they're kind of bulging out. That's the pressure change from being deep water. And so a lot of the weird ones that are deep water are caught in the royal red shrimp industry. If anybody has ever eaten a royal red, they're the big, slightly more expensive because you got to go out a long way to go catch them rather than a pink, a white, or a brown that's going to be in your po' boy or something. And so the royal reds are offshore and they're deep water, so you do get strange stuff like goosefish and monkfish and the anglerfish and Nemo and that sort of thing with that kind of fishing.
They're pulling nets in really deep water, and so this is how
this is how that kind of stuff
we came by these
sharks. So these were soaked as deep water sharks for us. These were soaked overnight with like red snapper carcass kind of thing, and that's how those were kind of pulled up, is offshore, just overnight for fun kind of things, because they were already offshore sampling, and so they put a line out.
Do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, if anybody's got any questions.
And if anyone is watching, you are welcome to submit questions as well.
Yeah, so if anybody has any shark-related questions, feel free to ask. Yes, go for it.
Do they have live birds, you say?
Oh, that is a great question. All right, you ready to go down a rabbit hole real quick? All right, so we talked about shark teeth on the beach, right? The other thing that people love to collect, mermaids' purses. All right, these are what hold their whoosies and whatsits galore, right? Mermaid, Little Mermaid, come on people. All right, but these are mermaids' purses, and most people would say that this is a shark egg. Not here. Other places around the world, you'll find mermaids' purses and they will be the eggs of a shark. What they are around us every time is its cousin, and that is a skate, not a stingray. So no stinger, rough thorny skin, not gonna envenomate you, not gonna hurt you. All right, so skates hatch out of eggs. Dogfish, a lot of these, and several of these guys might actually have come out of an egg. The smaller guys, but for us around here, it's always gonna be a skate. So some sharks lay eggs. Some sharks, the eggs hatch inside of the mother. All right, so there's no umbilical cord, but there's also no egg with the yolk attached anymore. So how do you grow up? Well, the way you grow up is the mother continues to make eggs, and they eat those eggs. All right, there is one freaky one that Discovery Channel likes to talk about that you see at other big aquariums called a sand tiger shark, and there is in utero, in the belly of the mom, cannibalism, where they eat each other, which is really bizarre. And then most of our sharks around us, like she said and asked about, are live young. So belly button scar, umbilical scar, and nearly all of these will have an umbilical scar. So some have live birth, some have live birth after they've hatched an egg, and then some of them literally lay an egg.
It's very unusual among any group of animals to have some species that lay eggs, some that give live birth, and then the other one is called ovoviviparous, where they have eggs, the mothers carry the eggs inside them, and then they hatch. And snakes also exhibit all three of those, but that's very uncommon for a group of animals to exhibit all three.
But it
not
does
any
give
particular species, but within that group.
So we found a batch of mermaids' purses walking the beach with a summer camp this summer, and they're not uncommon around here in the summer times. So, any other questions? We love questions. You know.
You guys are welcome to take a closer look at the specimens also, and
as you're walking around, if you have any questions, I can hang out for a little bit.
Come up as you are looking, and you're welcome to touch.
Yep. All right. So we're gonna.
You can tell them by at home, and we'll let them.
Okay. Sounds great. Well, thanks for tuning in to our Talk About Sharks. Again, if you have any questions, post on the YouTube page. We'll check it, and we'll try to reply to you. And feel free to peruse all of the other Boardwalk talks. Thanks, guys.